Melissa is a good friend of mine. We played frisbee the other day. We met. You're making me laugh. No, I'm just kidding. This will be fun. I'm looking forward to this conversation. But I
Okay.
first met Melissa at Cielo House. Um,
Mhm.
I was a recovery counselor. Melissa was a RD there, and she's since moved on to greener pastures. But we share a lot in common in doing this good work of recovery, of eating, of healing, of intuitive eating. I remember one of the first points we had in connection was that we were both reading either it was Christy Harrison or Intuitive Eating. There were some books that we were
Yes.
reading.
We bonded over food psych and also just health of every size in general. And it was very refreshing to talk to someone that um, works in the field that kind of got it. Because not everyone that works, I think, in the field of eating disorder recovery necessarily is on board with health at every size. So it was really refreshing to meet someone that was interested in it, and we could kind of bond over that.
Yeah, and we'll explore like health at every size principles in just a little bit. But I am remembering that it was Christy Harrison's book, Anti Diet.
Anti-diet, yeah.
You
That's like,
recommended that to me,
oh,
and
I
then
did?
yes,
I don't even
I
remember
yeah,
recommending
I remember that. You
it. Okay.
recommended that book to me, and that was the first book I'd ever heard about how this whole weight loss, obsession, dieting, body image, etc. culture
Mhm.
kind of didn't just go back like to the 1950s, but was around perhaps for like over 1,000 years, and there
Yeah,
was racial ties and social and colonization, and it
yeah,
made sense a lot to me hearing this vast history. It made sense that this is why these thoughts and these dieting problems become so ingrained. And I
mhm.
think like that's why it's so important that like the health at every size principles have we're kind of starting to adopt them more. And
Yeah.
yeah, speaking of health at every size principles, for those of you who are new to this idea, how would you like introduce someone to health at every size principles?
Yeah. So basically, health at every size is promoting health, or practicing health promoting behaviors without putting the emphasis on someone's weight, and recognizing that you can be at any weight and be, able to practice these health promoting behaviors like exercising regularly, like eating a wide range of foods. Yes, fruits and vegetables are have their place, but also allowing yourself, access to those fun foods too. That not everyone usually, like not everyone
Yeah.
really sometimes allows themselves access to,
Mm,
and just really promoting health without the emphasis on weight. Yeah,
totally. Uh,
yeah.
Do you fall in love with health at every size? I know you love it.
I do. I really do. It honestly just really when I started at Cielo House, I had no idea what I was in for, in the sense that my whole world would be changed and opened up to the idea that you don't have to, consistently be trying to manipulate your weight to be healthy, because that was always the traditional mindset I had before I learned about health at every size, from school, from my family, from outside like societal influences. And it's a huge weight off your shoulders when you realize you don't have to worry about your weight, that your body will get to this point where it's at the weight it's supposed to be when you're eating enough and when you're taking care of yourself, and not having to have that weight on your shoulders of worrying about where your weight is going, and just instead focusing on just feeling good in your body and doing things you enjoy.
Hmm. And I'm realizing I didn't go to school for dietetics,
Hmm. Hmm.
but the way you spoke, I'm realizing that they don't teach health at every size.
No, I had no idea what health at every size or intuitive eating was
Mm,
until I explored the eating disorder recovery field. And I think we touched on eating disorders for like 1 hour of one class the entire time I was in school. Like maybe more than an hour, like maybe one day was spent talking about it. But overall, the mental health effects of restriction were never talked about. the way your body, when you're not getting enough food, will go into this like starvation mode where it's holding on to everything because it doesn't know when it's going to get enough in the future or in the present, moment, if someone is dieting or restricting their intake. And none of this was ever talked about. And
Mm.
it was a very traditional type of school that, did not talk about these experiences. I've talked to a couple dietitians that, had known about it. I think through their internship, after you go to school for dietetics, you do the internship program. And then from there, you pass the test and then you're a dietitian. And I met some people that were exposed to it doing some of their rotations in eating disorder recovery in their internship, which I unfortunately didn't have that as part of my internship because the internships really vary from area to area and program to program. But it's not talked about in school, and it is a relatively, I wouldn't say newer. It's like newer-ish, but I guess it's getting more popular among the healthcare system as well.
Mm-hmm.
People are fed up of feeling stigmatized and not feeling good, and when they go to the doctor and having everything blamed on their weight. So
Yeah.
I expect in the future it to get even more popular and grow among the community and just among people. And
Mm-hmm.
once they start hearing about it, it really resonates with a lot of people, I think.
It does. It absolutely does. I feel that there oftentimes is pushback about health at every size. I feel like one of the big misconceptions is taking it literally. What are your thoughts on that? Like, I imagine I've talked to one of my good friends, and his basic thing was you can't be 500 pounds and be considered healthy. My perception of health at every size is more what you were saying earlier, that healthy behaviors are possible at every size.
Mm-hmm.
um, and 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 that so much of the time we there's so much shame and around weight, and that shame blocks us from doing healthy behaviors. That's kind of my take on it. I feel like there's a big misconception um, that it's being literal about health at every size. But that might be just me. Maybe you have a different perspective.
No, you ask a great question. This is something that everyone asks someone, asks a dietitian or someone that promotes health at every size of like, when does someone get too large to the point where they're no longer quote unquote healthy, right?
Mhm.
But the way I think about it that makes sense to me is that if someone does get to a weight where they really can't where they're very having a lot of health issues, there's no direct, like from the evidence, there's no direct causative effect that the weight is what causes the health issues.
Mm.
And the way I also think about it is a lot of people, dieting, right, and restriction is an indicator or is associated with weight gain. That constant restriction, your body is, like I said, in that starvation mindset where you don't know when your next meal is going to be. You're, eating based off of all these external cues, and is a real indicator for like long-term weight gain the more someone is repeatedly dieting. So I think that's something important to kind of highlight as well, in the sense that when people are living in larger bodies or larger, they a lot of the time have tried dieting, and because that's what the healthcare system tells them to do, to try harder. If you're not at a weight that's quote unquote healthy, whatever that means to the person that's saying that, right? Because that can mean something different for everyone. Whatever, telling them that dieting and restriction or over exercise is the way to get to that quote unquote healthy weight. But in reality too, a whole other concept that I think about with it is that a lot of people put emotional aspects onto the food, right? So are more likely to be binging as well when they're coming out of that restriction mindset. And if someone is eating, enough to nourish their body and not restricting themselves and has worked through their emotional stuff with food, typically they're going to be at a weight that they can do activities. They can go on a walk. They can, you know, go on a bike ride or do things that they want to do. Um, so that's the way I kind of try and think about it, is the body is just, it holds a lot of our experiences in the sense that, with restriction, with dieting and things like that, it can affect our weight and it can cause our weight to go up. But, through working through possible emotional ties that we put on food
Yeah.
and through just getting out of that dieting, restriction and then binging mindset and kind of having that healthy relationship with food, I do believe that your body will get to a weight that is right for you and that you can do things you want to do.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's not letting
I
your
hope that answered the question. I feel like I went on and on, but
well, what do you think is the biggest obstacle about people adopting health at every size principles?
oh, that's a great question. Hmm. An obstacle that's preventing people
Like, because
from using it.
it seems
Okay.
like from what I was hearing from you is that it kind of just like you absorbed it like a sponge, right?
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
And then um as much as you absorb it like a sponge, I imagine people have like some difficulties with it. Although, you know, I'm just thinking in terms of like at the at some of the people at Cielo House. Maybe there's
Yeah,
a there's or wherever, right?
yeah.
Um, there can be a a disdain.
Resistance.
I
Mhm.
disdain like health at every size, poo, like poo poo, like okay, that's great. Like
Yeah.
these are tough questions. I might get some flack later on, but don't blame Melissa, blame me because if anything, no, but there I guess it's my feeling that talking to some people there can be sort of a disdain around health at every size. Like, oh yeah, that's great on paper, but like I'm still gonna try to lose weight.
Yeah. I think, I don't know if I fully agree with what I'm about to say 100%, but sometimes someone hasn't hit like almost like dieting or like restriction rock bottom
Mm,
in the sense that they don't feel fed up with it enough and don't feel like it's not working for them enough.
mm,
Um, and that might be, and maybe they're just very ingrained in not being able to take in that new information, like such as health at every size. Like I can say, like my family, we have reoccurring arguments about whether or not this is the right approach. And I've had to set that boundary of like, we've had these conversations before. I think that you guys are both maybe not very open to taking this new approach. And I think we should just kind of leave it at that. And maybe we don't continue discussing it any further, because sometimes you have to say that with people that are not willing to take in that information and savor your energy and where you want to put that energy out, like if someone is just really not willing to take that in, right? And a great example too is like, a person like Christy Harrison that's as big in the field as she is, she's spoken on the podcast numerous times about how she was exposed, I think, to health at every size or intuitive eating by a friend or I think a coworker or something. And, kind of said like, oh, that's not for me. That doesn't make sense. That's not, um, not the right thing to do or whatever. And then came back to it later and, and is now like revolving her whole career around this. So I think that's a great example of like, you have to be willing to learn new information. You have to be willing to approach things from a different way, from a more like self-compassionate lens that not everyone maybe is in a state where they're willing to take that in and try and look at things differently.
yeah, and no need to go into too much detail with your parents, but I feel like probably the conversations you have with your parents would probably be representative of many other conversations that people have when they
Yeah.
hear about intuitive eating or health at every size. Um, what do you think those conversations go like for other people? What do you how do they kind of go with your family? I don't want to go too much into detail there, but just like
Yeah.
I, I'm imagining sitting down at the dinner table and a snide comment comes up. I don't know. This is what my imagination is
Yeah.
telling me, and I kind of want your feedback on how things go. But maybe like a comment comes up like, "Oh, you shouldn't eat that," or like, "Do you really think that's healthy for you?" Or like,
Mhm.
I don't know, some comment like that, and then I imagine you like, like like I don't know. I just imagine like an argument unfolding, sort of like that. When people have resistance to like intuitive eating healthy at every size, what's been your experience? Like, what do they say about it?
I mean, the most common response is what you brought up, like,
Mm,
well, how large of a body can someone be in and truly be healthy, right?
mm, mm,
That's a common one. Another one is just like with my family, a lot of it is like putting judgment on foods of like
mm.
needing to eat only quote unquote healthy foods, or like even sometimes as a family, my family will try and bring in like, oh, let's just maybe just skip breakfast and we'll just eat a big lunch later. And in
Mm.
reality, like, I'm hungry, I want to eat, like, and a lot of judgment being put on someone for maybe following those internal regulatory systems versus external cues of when, like, timing and when's okay to eat and when's not, that
Yeah, I
diet
just
culture
was,
and society puts on.
on these online dating apps. I was just chatting to a girl the other day, and she mentioned a comment, and I'll sometimes find these on like online dating apps. Women will say something. She said, this was a really, I mean, I felt attracted to her, and she said a comment like, "I hope you don't mind a girl with an appetite." I was
Mm,
like, "No, I don't. Like, you should be eating. Like,
right.
you absolutely need to eat. Like,
Yeah.
I didn't really go into it at the time over text or whatever. I didn't say I work at an eating disorder center where
Yeah,
like
yeah. It's
people,
like how much do you want to share with a
yeah, like
response?
trust
Yeah,
me, I understand. Like,
yeah, yeah.
but I mean, I feel like that her just that her remark like, hope you don't mind a girl with an appetite.
That just
It
shows
was
that,
said jokingly, but
yeah,
I mean, it's there,
coming
right?
from a
Like,
place of hurt where they've probably been hurt
yeah, yeah.
before
There's been
and that.
judgment. There's been judgment there. Oh, you're eating breakfast or whatever. You're
Yeah.
yeah, there can be those. Was it difficult for you to say no to your parents
Oh
with
yeah.
that? Like,
That's something I'm continuously working on, is
mm,
that boundary setting. And there's usually tears involved when I
mm,
do, say something like that to them of like, we've had these conversations. I don't think we're going to be changing our views, and
mm,
we need to just respect, each other's opinions and that they differ, and realize that like my approach works for me and your approach might be working for you, and respect that, you
mm.
know? Yeah, no,
And
it's
when,
hard to set those boundaries for sure. It's
because I
really hard.
imagine like you've said that probably more than once, or
I
maybe
mean,
not, maybe not, maybe not.
yeah,
Okay.
I've made comments and things of like, this works for me before, but really seriously set that boundary of like, I don't want to talk about this anymore, was more recent, because I have a hard time doing it.
Mm,
Uh, because I get very emotional, because honestly, it's like, coming from a place of hurt too, of like, well, you feel like the people that are most important to you, your family, don't really get it.
yeah.
And this is obviously something that's important to me. Um, and to have some people like that close to you that don't get it is hard,
Yeah. Yeah.
but
Did you, just curious, I imagine your how you set the boundary with your parents, I imagine that could be a great example for other people. Did you get them aside for a private conversation, and
yeah.
or was it okay? Yeah.
Yeah, mostly just, I forget what happened. I think my dad said something that really got under my skin, and then I like had gone on a run and kind of thought about it.
Mm,
I like to really think about things when I'm running, and had come back and had like planned out how I was going to set the boundary when I
good,
got back,
good.
and then, sat him down and then kind of said the same thing to my mom. But I find this really interesting. After I set that boundary with my mom and dad, my mom actually just started reading anti-diet because I had ordered it for them to read if they wanted to, and it'd been sitting in the house for months. And now, after setting that boundary of like, okay, I don't think we can discuss this anymore because it's not healthy for me to keep arguing with people or trying to prove my point and get you on board with something that you're not ready to get on board with.
Yeah.
Now my mom has started reading it. So I'm like, okay, maybe
Interesting.
setting that boundary is good in that sense, where if the people that you're setting that boundary with really want to learn more, then they'll do that on their own. And then maybe come back when they're more receptive.
Yeah, I think
Talking
that's
about it.
important. I think that's important for me personally as well. Because I'll hang out with my guy friends, and I'll oftentimes hear remarks like, just I'll hear remarks
About people's bodies.
about people's bodies, about weight loss, about even emotional eating stuff,
Yeah.
and and that sometimes I try to convince them,
Mm.
or I guess where I'm asking these questions about the pushback on health at every size is probably because of various things that I've come across where I do get pushback, and it's like I kind of am learning to. I hate to I hate to say shut my mouth, but
Yeah.
so far that's kind of what's been happening in terms of like, you know what, I'm not going to talk about this because the mindset just isn't there. Um, so, anyways, I think that's important. For me right now, I guess it's not at a point where I need to draw a boundary, but maybe at some point in the future I will. I can hear that this health at every size stuff like really resonates with you. Um, like, is that the type of dietitian you would consider yourself now, or how would you like consider? Are you a nutritionist? Are you a health at every size counselor? How do you like call yourself these days?
You ask a great question. So, I mean, as you know, I was exposed to all this when I started at Cielo House, and it still is very true to how I want to be a dietitian, right? And since leaving Cielo House, I work for DaVita as a renal dietitian, specializing in with people that are on dialysis.
Mm,
And I have found myself being put in situations where, in order to qualify for kidney transplants, patients, the insurance companies will determine a specific weight that patients need to lose if they have a BMI usually of over 30 is what they go by. And I find myself put in situations where I try my best to use intuitive eating with the patients that I work with, because a lot of them will even say like, "Oh, you know, I binged on ice cream." And I'm like, even when someone is using that terminology, that that restriction mindset is coming in, and there's a sale on ice cream, and they see like that sale, and they get like 10 cartons of ice cream because they don't know when they're going to have it, allow themselves to have it again.
mhm.
And for people on dialysis, there is a very specific diet they have to follow in order to survive basically on dialysis. Do you want me to share a little more about what that diet looks like?
Yeah, I'm very curious too, and also about how you do intuitive eating with this diet, because diet and intuitive eating, they kind of don't go together, right? But
I
yeah,
mean,
no. So
yeah.
I
And
mean, in a nutshell.
when I say diet, I don't mean like restricting calories. I
Mm,
mean like a eating pattern kind of. So when someone's kidneys stop working, right? Or like in a person that has healthy functioning kidneys, our kidneys are working, 24/7 to clean the blood, to produce urine, to do all these amazing functions for us that we honestly take for granted if our kidneys work well. I try to reflect on that a little bit now, working with this population and seeing how
mm.
difficult the it is to manage, and coming in and spending 4 or 5 hours 3 times a week on dialysis. So think about it, how much time that is a year, right? I haven't done the math, but it's a lot.
Wait, how much is that? 4 or 5 times a
So
week?
they have to come in usually 3 times a week for 4 to 5, anywhere from actually 3 to 4 hours usually.
Damn.
Um, and that's the dialysis is the machine, filtering and cleaning the blood and putting it back in the body basically. Um, it's doing the function of the kidneys only three times a week for 4 hours. So think
Wow.
about So when someone, and those 3 times a week that they come in are usually Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. It's supposed to be spread out. That way,
Yeah.
the foods they eat, the fluids they drink can get filtered out through the treatment. So when someone is on dialysis, specifically potassium and phosphorus are two minerals that basically they're larger in size, and the machine has a more difficult time, I guess you could say, filtering those out from the blood. So people on dialysis need to watch how much potassium and phosphorus they're eating in foods.
Hmm.
Um, and a lot of potassium foods are a lot of fruits and vegetables, and a lot of phosphorus foods are dairy, meat, beans, nuts, things like that. So it's a very restrictive diet in that sense of
Yeah.
like you have to really, and it's so they can feel well too. There's a lot of really scary side effects that can happen if someone does have too much of those foods between treatments, like potassium. Specifically, someone can have a heart attack if they have too much potassium because it's involved in muscle contraction. And the heart is our most important muscle, right? So, or one of the most important muscles. And then phosphorus can cause itchy skin. It can actually deposit in the skin and cause your skin to get really itchy. It can cause bloodshot eyes. It can cause issues with the bones. Many negative things that you don't want happening in the body.
Do you have conversations with people where they, because they're restricting, they want these foods, but then they can't have these foods because the
Mhm.
diet, but then because they
And
can't
that's
have
and
them, they
that's what I
want them.
try and yeah, and that's what I try and work on with them as much as I can of like, you know, something really high in potassium like a banana. That's something that most of the like you really can't have,
Mm.
period. But those really, really high potassium phosphorus foods, like trying to find an alternative that maybe tastes similar, um, that is lower in those two minerals, but trying to find that happy medium of like, you can have some of these, like let's find these low potassium fruits and vegetables
Mm.
that are more acceptable for you to have, that can still give you that healthy fiber and give you those vitamins and minerals that the body needs, but in a different way, and being sensitive in that way of
What are
avoiding.
some substitutes for, like, the common, so if someone cannot or should not have bananas, and like, what's a good substitute for bananas? I'm trying to think of like
That's
another
a
food
great
that
question.
seems
Honestly,
similar.
avocado is pretty high in potassium, and avocado has that same texture and consistency. So sometimes
You're just
it's like
screwed.
it's a very restrictive diet.
Damn.
And it's something that I'm learning every day how to incorporate intuitive eating with it, because it is very
Hmm.
challenging.
Hmm.
And speaking of and intuitive, and also they need to get weighed before they come. Their pre-weight and their post-weight is very important to see the fluids that are removed.
Uh-huh.
And they're encouraged to even weigh themselves each day at home to monitor how much fluids they drink between treatments, because most of the time they're not urinating because their kidneys are not able to produce urine. So whatever you're drinking is staying in your body. So definitely I'm not telling them not to weigh themselves because
Yeah, no,
that's
yeah.
part of like needing to function on dialysis.
Yeah, this is a very interesting case where
Yeah,
intuitive eating is, you know,
challenging.
and challenging, because
Yeah.
oftentimes with intuitive eating too, you'll put away the scale and so forth.
Yeah. And
Uh,
what I try and do with them is like I go over their monthly labs looking at their blood levels of potassium and phosphorus and things like that. And I won't necessarily encourage them to, like, if their potassium's in range and it's good, I'm not going to focus on that in the sense of like, let's limit your potassium. If your potassium levels are good, they're good, right? Trying to take that approach of like not making it more restrictive when it doesn't need to be. If what they're doing is working, not necessarily pushing like, oh, we'll avoid this and avoid that, like instead focusing on what might need some tweaking
I got
of when their labs are off in that sense. And encouraging just like very small amounts. Like a lot of the times, like, yeah, I know I used a banana as an example, and that is a high potassium food, but having a very small amount on rare occasions is okay too.
you.
So using it in that sense of like, it's not that you can never have any of these foods ever, ever, right?
Mm,
But it's really watching the amount. It's maybe even planning it to have it on a day that you know you're going to come to dialysis, or the day before dialysis. That way it can be filtered out that way. So really working with the patients to kind of see that gray middle ground of like what can work to help keep them healthy in that sense.
Yeah. And I imagine it's easier to prevent renal failure than it is to deal with renal failure. You know, like once a problem is actually a problem, it's a problem. But if you can prevent the problem, great. In a nutshell, and I think you're already going to say just be generally, you know, have a great lifestyle and etc. But how can someone like avoid renal failure? Is this something that can happen to me? Is this something that only happens to older people?
So
Um,
the two most common reasons why someone needs dialysis, there's two different kinds. There's an acute kidney injury, which can be like an
car
acute
accident or something, or
yeah, if they have trauma to the body, like if they are like stabbed or something or shot,
I'm
or
imagining a boxer, you know, I don't know,
maybe
because they
yeah,
go
they
kidney
have
punches. I don't know.
maybe yeah.
Mhm.
I don't work with like most of the time when they're coming on dialysis, like they need dialysis, they have chronic kidney disease, and then it's developed to end stage renal disease or end stage kidney disease. And what causes that is uncontrolled diabetes, or also uncontrolled high blood pressure, as well as there's some, very rarely we have some patients that have like genetic issues that can cause damage to the kidneys, or even if they've had kidney cancer. Um, but most of the people that need dialysis are older. But there are some that are in like their 30s or 40s or 50s that you'd be surprised like that they're there. And it usually, if that's the case, it's more um, a genetic component or some type of yeah. Sometimes it's uncontrolled diabetes too, and uncontrolled high blood pressure. But overall, just in terms of like keeping your kidneys healthy, just the normal thing, like if you have, you know, high blood pressure, if you have diabetes, managing those with the appropriate medications, and you know, especially with diabetes, eating, trying to eat complex carbohydrates, but also leaving room for those simple sugars as well that will affect blood sugar more quickly, but also need to have them in certain instances where it makes sense, and also allowing yourself some of those fun foods.
Yeah, yeah. Um, and you also have a private practice, right? You're. Can you help me differentiate between your work at the Davita or whatever, and what you do in private practice?
Yeah, so my private practice is currently kind of my side hustle. So I don't have many clients, but I do have my own website that people can find me on and can either shoot me an email, or submit a, you know, contact form on there. But the reason why I started my private practice was because, you know, I kind of needed, wanted to work in a different environment other than residential treatment. I wanted to really keep working with that population of people in eating disorder recovery, and those working to kind of heal from chronic dieting as well.
Mhm.
Um, and I really do find a lot of uh, joy in working with that population. So I didn't want to completely not work with them anymore when I left Cielo House. So hence why I started the private practice. And that's primarily the type of people that I'm seeing in my private practice, but and working to use, you know, those the Hayes and intuitive eating principles with that population.
Do you give a history of dieting?
Me?
Yeah.
I mean, I have definitely tried some diets, yeah. Um, and done some things, you know, that did you know, cause an unhealthy relationship with food at times. But surprisingly, I think a lot of the reason, honestly, why intuitive eating and Haze really resonated with me is because I've always loved food. I've
Mm,
always loved eating. I love that it brings people together. I
mm,
love that you can have fun with it too and enjoy
mm.
it and eat, you know, good tasting food. And I I've never really been super on the diety train. Like I have, yes, dabbled in different diets from time to time, but I've always loved to eat. And I have,
I love that.
to quote your friend, I have
Yeah,
had a
right?
healthy appetite. So, you
Well,
know,
you read my mind because
yeah.
I was getting at like what I hear your passion. It's clear and it's palpable, and just trying to figure out why, and get into that why. And I feel like that's so true.
Yeah.
Your love of
'Cause
food.
and for someone that does love food like that too, I did always have like a little bit of guilt over like on my
Hmm.
mind of like, well, I need
Hmm.
to now I ate, this and now I need to make up for it and eat,
Hmm.
salads or whatever
Hmm.
my mind told me that at the time, right? And once I found intuitive eating and haze, it really took that guilt away, and it's very, very, very refreshing to not have to worry about that of like of needing to compensate and eating what foods sound good and honoring that. And that's always something that I've tried to do for the most part, other than when I did kind of go down that diety um, path, but it was really refreshing to find a community that accepts that and accepts that you don't need to feel guilty and you are worthy of love and acceptance no matter what you weigh or no matter what foods you choose to eat. Like it's your body. You can do what you want. And, you know,
Ooh.
by nourishing it and giving it what it needs, it'll get to this place where it's healthy for what's healthy for you, right? Whatever weight range is healthy for me
Mm.
or whoever chooses to practice that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I resonate with that. I feel that message, your story, that aspect of your self and experiences are, you know, uh, as you grow your practice and so forth and continue on, I encourage you to talk about that. I
Yeah.
feel, I mean, I know based on what you're talking, that random conversation with that girl, um, it's out there like that. It's bad to have an appetite,
Oh yeah.
right? Like it's
Don't
bad to
trust your
be,
body. Your body
don't
doesn't
trust your
know what
body.
what it
Yeah, your
wants. Yeah.
body, like it doesn't,
Hmm.
yeah. And that there's shame around having an
Hmm.
appetite.
Yeah.
Um, so
Especially as if you identify as female.
yeah, yes, yes, yeah, totally. I know,
And other genders,
100%.
I'm sure as well. But I know, like in the
No, I mean,
typical,
yes,
yeah.
yes, but it's harder on women for sure.
Mm.
Yeah. Um, well, okay. So where's your website?
Yeah, my website is Melissa Welch RD. The RD stands for registered dietitian. So melissawelchrd.com. If you want to submit, if people are interested in working with me or even just connecting about anything really, you can submit a contact form on there, or you can just shoot me a straight email at melissawelchrd@gmail.com.
Great.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, this has been fun.
This has been really fun. Yeah, I'm so glad that you wanted to have me on the podcast. This has been a lot of fun.
Yeah, great. I'm excited to like keep on growing alongside,
Yeah.
in this field with you. So
It's
be
always
cool to see
nice to
where
have
our journeys
that
go.
connection of people that are in the field and that get it too, because sometimes it can be overwhelming with people that don't understand this approach and
Yeah.
it doesn't make sense to them. So it's
Yeah.
nice to know people that are on board with it.
Yeah. I feel comfort or something in the fact that not everyone is ready for this message, and like I guess that's okay. Or
Yeah,
it is the way it is. I mean,
it is. Yeah.
and
Fine.
I don't need to like prove any. That's what I'm feeling. I don't need to like prove this to someone.
Mm.
Um,
That's what I'm working on trying to
yeah.
not do too. Not trying
Hmm.
to feel like I have to get everyone on board with it because it's been so meaningful and powerful to me,
Hmm.
but recognizing that stage of change someone is in, and if they're not,
Yeah. That.
if the words they're using are telling you they're not ready to take it in, then setting that boundary.
Yeah. I love it.
Yeah.
Okay. Hey, thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah, of course.